as a child, my father was a very good amateur pianist, and whenever he came back from his work, he started to play the piano, Chopin, all sorts of opera paraphrases. So I really grew up with the sound of a piano in my ears and started trying to pick out little melodies when I was sort of 3 years old. And at some stage they must have sounded like real music, so my parents decided it was maybe a good idea to find a piano teacher and see what would happen. From all of Mozart's piano concertos, the D minor really stands out. He only composed 2 of the concertos out of 27 in minor keys, the C minor and this D minor. And I would say the C minor is a sort of very formal, partly even religious piece, but the D minor really has a sort of threatening and uncomfortable undertone. I think Mozart uses D minor, for instance, in Don Giovanni at the quite eerie scenes. He uses it in the Requiem. So for him it is a sort of key that has to do a lot with death and yeah, sort of not so happy feelings and emotions. And I think that makes this concerto such a unique piece actually within his whole oeuvre. The great thing I find about Mozart piano concertos is it's pure opera. It's not an orchestra that's accompanying a soloist. I mean, the orchestra is a person, the pianist is a person. In his later concertos you get a third person, which is the winds, who get a very special and important part, especially in slower movements. So he finally finds his 3 characters to stage his little opera, and it's full of conflict, it's full of harmony, it's full of disharmony, so it's extremely exciting to play. And one of the things I always find when I play Mozart, I never feel like a soloist, it's pure chamber music. There's a lot of places where you are accompanying a flute solo or a wind solo, violin solo, so I think you have to be constantly aware of what's happening next to you on stage and react to that. And that's why I find it so exciting to work now with a new orchestra and a new conductor where I haven't been working with before. So you suddenly might have a completely new angle, and you never know what's going to come out of that. So every concert is a surprise in that way. It's very tempting to imagine what Mozart would have done if he was alive nowadays. Well, obviously he would be composing, but I think since he had such a strong bond with this opera, I think he might have turned his hand onto a musical. So there might have been, next to Andrew Lloyd Webber, Stephen Sondheim, Leonard Bernstein, there might have been Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart with the latest musical hit on Broadway. And I'm sure he would have found it interesting, and he would have definitely written for it. I mean, some of his operas, the earlier operas, they are almost like musicals with a lot of spoken text and some songs. Yeah, and then if you start thinking, who would be the modern day Mozart, I find it a very difficult question to answer. I think for me it was one person who came probably very close, and I would say that's Freddie Mercury, who for me had the same intention as Mozart, the same way of music making, absolute perfect singing in tune. I mean, he was a great musician and a great showman, and I think Mozart combined these 2 things as well. So I'm sure that Mozart would have admired Freddie Mercury. They probably would have got on very well. You never know, but it's nice to think about. I sometimes find myself on stage during a rehearsal with orchestra, and suddenly it comes to me that what a great profession it actually is, that you're surrounded by beauty, you're even getting paid for it at times, and it's the perfect way of spending your life. I mean, I'm not working with figures or with other things. I'm surrounded by beauty, and I think that is the great thing of being a musician. Of course, it's very hard work, and you need a lot of discipline, but the rewards are incredible. If I think of dream projects, I've done already quite a lot of them. I've recorded the complete piano works by Beethoven, Mozart and Haydn, which for me are the three composers I perhaps love best. Maybe my dream project would be to do it all over again. I don't think nowadays that CD companies are sitting waiting for someone who does it all over again, but since music is never finished, it's always work in progress, and some of these recordings are now almost 20 years old, and I've developed in that time. So I would love to do them all over again, but that's probably going to be a dream rather than reality. Well, there is a big difference, of course, between playing Mozart on a fortepiano and on a modern piano, but I have played it so often on these period instruments that the sound of that, it sticks between your ears, and whenever I play on a modern piano, I can't get rid of that. So what I try to do is get as close to that sound as possible with a modern piano, and it probably means that you're not using the full dynamic range of a modern instrument. You're a little bit more careful, maybe a little bit more short, less legato, more staccato or leggero. And I found that in that way you can actually, well, people quite often say after a concert, a Mozart piano concerto or modern piano, it sounded as if you were playing a fortepiano. And I think that is probably my aim, to make the modern piano sound a little bit more like a fortepiano, which is a lot easier than the other way around, I can tell you.